Welcome to the Tuesday, March 26, 2019 School Board Workshop meeting. Regretfully, Chair Mizelle Hubbs could not be here, so I'm Heather Altenberg and I call the meeting to order, but I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth Seifries, the Finance Chair.
Thank you. So as you know, we're kind of on the fence about having this meeting or not, and so because we received the range of health insurance increases and the ceiling on the range was lower than expected, we felt that it was important to actually keep the meeting because the difference in what we projected for those costs and what, the highest possibility of those costs is a little more significant than, we'll just let Donna push that forward. So that is why we're here tonight. I'm not going to do the full, 20-minute spiel that I usually do, but I will remind people that we welcome and enjoy all public comment at the beginning and the end of the meeting, and that questions and comments can be sent to myself or Susanna via email as well. You just go to the town or school department website, navigate to the school board section, and click on the email link to send your thoughts to us. I do like to reiterate the school board budget goals at the beginning of every one of these meetings, and so here they are once again. Number 1, maintaining and improving the high quality of education for every student. Careful examination of line items and consideration of the success and effectiveness of the expenditures in order to provide a fiscally responsible budget. And number 3, clear and continual communication throughout the budget process. So, without further ado, I will just quickly talk about the agenda and then open the floor to public comment. Really, the meat of the meeting tonight is a proposal for the use of health insurance savings for fiscal year 20. Any questions and answers around that? And then we will have another opportunity for citizen comment. So at this time, would anybody like to speak? When? Would you? The floor is open if anybody would like to speak. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to turn the floor over to Superintendent Wolfram.
Okay, so you have some documents in the packet behind the people in the audience. Thanks, Jason. So we did receive word, as Elizabeth said, from the MEA Benefits Trust on Thursday, that the highest rate for the July 1, 2019 renewal would be 7%. So this is a decrease of 3% from the 10% that we had included in the FY20 budget. This represents a $101,485 decrease in the projected increase. So we're really talking about $101,485. So on Thursday, Board Chair Susanna Mizelle Hubbs and Finance Chair Elizabeth Seifries and I met to discuss the impact on the new of the news on the FY20 budget. In that meeting, it was proposed, after some discussion, that the expenditure budget be decreased to a 5.9% increase over FY19. And that you will see
Brings us to
yeah, so you will see that on your chart on the 3rd page in your packet. So this reduction represents $47,673, which brings the increase on the taxpayer down to 4.94%. So again, you'll see that on the budget tax implication sheet. At the bottom is the 4.94%, the impact on the taxes. The remaining amount would be placed in the contingency fund, and that would be $53,811. Placing this additional amount in the contingency fund would increase the fund, which would, and we talked about possibilities of use for that fund if we needed to hire an additional teacher. We're looking carefully at the kindergarten numbers if we needed to hire, we have some additional ELL students coming in that we will need to provide services for. And the contingency money that isn't spent in FY20 could be added to the fund balance and carried into FY21 to reduce the tax burden on our citizens. So that's the proposal on the table right now. If you have any questions or would like to talk about it.
Do you mind if I just, I believe that it's not a question mark around the ELL students, if I'm correct? It's we know that they're coming in, is that correct?
Correct. We already have 5, I believe it's 5 new kindergartners, right, who will need to be tested and may require ELL services, but they have responded to the language use survey as there being a second language that's spoken in the home and therefore would require testing.
So just to share a little more with the board, when Susanna and Donna and myself met, we were aware of that. And then also, as Donna said, we were really trying to keep those kindergarten numbers in our mind. I know, and personally, not speaking for the board, but speaking for myself, and Susanna also concurred, we don't want to start the school year with a kindergarten class over our class size range. And so, you know, that's something that we want the superintendent and the principal to really pay attention to, as well as have the funds available to pull the trigger if we need to. So with those two things in mind, that's why we felt really strongly about bringing the proposal to the board about using the remainder of the funds after reduction for taxpayers to put that remainder into contingency. So that's the proposal. The floor is open for discussion.
Could I just ask for the ELL, Kathy? So we know that English is there's a different language that they're speaking at home than
Right.
English, and we test them over the summer or not until the school year
They're not
begins?
tested typically until, they have to be tested within, I believe the state requires within 30 days of their beginning the school year, but we would like to do that more quickly than that, so. Right, and the way it works is there's a form called a language use survey. It's a form that the Maine Department of Education puts out. It's required to be in all of the enrollment packets, and it asks about language use in the home, as well as just information about the student's background, and any student or family responding yes to any of those questions, any student in that situation has to be tested, so. Did that answer?
And then the testing
would occur, right, would indicate whether at what level, it's a screener, and then it indicates what their level of English proficiency is, and then depending on how the student tests, the ELL teacher determines the number of minutes of service time each week the student should receive.
Yeah. So we wouldn't know then until the school year
Correct.
starts if
Yes.
it turns out
Correct.
that there's a need or not. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Nasser.
It's a common being a parent of the ELL. So that age is absolutely 99% possible that the support is needed, especially in kindergarten and first grade. In the ELL, a little bit above that, at home who speaks another language probably can pick it up, but someone who's that age will definitely need it, probably judging from my own experience. And I want to ask a question. If that amount was taken out, what percentage would the 4.9% would be reduced to?
And could you clarify your question?
Yeah. So there was a contingency of putting the 54,000 away, right?
So,
But if that was not taken out, I mean, there's not a big reduction, right? From 4.9
Yeah,
We were talking about 0.01% or 0.02%.
the contingency amount was, that was added, that would be added into contingency was $53,811, so. So you're asking what,
If that was not added, is that saving money, is the question or no?
So we budgeted 10% for an increase in our health insurance benefit premiums. And we received word that the ceiling, the highest that the increase could be is 7%. So that's where Donna got that $101,000.
Yeah.
So in essence, it is sort of a savings, but really it's just that we budgeted very, very conservatively because in the past, last year, our health insurance increase was quite high, and we hadn't budgeted appropriately for that. History had taught us that we could not be quite so conservative, and then out of nowhere, we had a high number. So now we're saying, okay, so it's sort of a savings, but really it's a reduction in spending. It's money that we don't necessarily have.
so we took
Right.
some of the money, the proposal is to take some of the money to decrease the expenditure budget, and then take the rest of the money and put it into contingency.
Okay.
So we have a contingency fund that exists already.
100,000.
100,000, and the proposal was to increase it. It would go up to a little over 150,000, with the thought of the very likely possibility that we would need to increase the ELL teacher. And there can be discussion outside of this. Kathy was talking about how, what that might look like, which wouldn't necessarily impact the budget discussion, but the flexibility around meeting with students is a different discussion. And also our concern around the kindergarten numbers, we really wanted to have that in mind, and that could be more than $100,000. And so we really wanted to keep an eye on that. And then, if we didn't have to use, whatever we don't have to use out of the contingency fund rolls into our undesignated fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, which then can be used, carried forward in our next budget process to help bring the tax impact down.
Thank you.
Where's that line item for the undesignated fund balance that we currently have?
If you, wrong one. So we don't have, I don't believe we have
We haven't done a new one.
we don't have a new one in our packet. This sheet that's in the packet tonight talks about how much of the undesignated fund balance we are using this year. It doesn't talk about what we have left. Typically, as we talked about last time, school departments like to keep between 1% and 2%.
Right.
And so we'll have to figure out, I'm sure that when Catherine and Donna were preparing the budget, there was an eye toward, keeping it within that range and that sort of thing. And as Herb told us last time, we're not allowed to keep more than 3%.
And so the undesignated fund balance is on the revenue side?
Okay.
So it is on that sheet that you have?
We have a new one for tonight at the back of the packet.
This one where I'm looking at, is it the unassigned? Oh,
Yes.
that's the use of unassigned.
Yeah, we have a use of unassigned fund balance line in this chart.
But not the,
What's left?
what's left.
Right.
That number is, are we in the, I don't recall, are we in the 1% or where are we?
I don't know.
Are we getting close? I'm just wondering if we're getting close to that threshold of 3%, or are we really?
I don't think we are.
Or 1%? Are we?
Historically, we've drawn it down we've drawn it down very, very
Exactly,
aggressively,
because I
so.
remember how we talked about last time, Herb, you said like some schools, like for instance Yarmouth, just goes ahead and spends it on building maintenance and
They put it into different funds.
they put it into
We
different
put into
funds,
different
yes.
reserve funds. The 3% factor, you can come in with a 5% surplus, but as long as 3% or less than 3% that's dedicated into your next budget,
Okay,
the state's okay with that. But if you put it in the budget for FY20 and you had money allocated for undesignated surplus to go towards lowering the taxes, if after you do that, your undesignated balance is still over 3%, then the state will just reduce your subsidy the following year. So it's like
Not
an
a-
adjustment they'll
not a
make.
big thing.
So you can come in more than 3,
We
but as
don't-
long as some of that's
we've never done
dedicated to
that.
next year's budget,
Right.
it keeps you under 3, you're okay.
I thought there was maybe some benefit in showing a positive fund balance, like a healthy fund balance.
Well, Donna and I were talking about that this week. My position on fund balances is that it's like chasing your tail sometimes. You're always looking at the next year's budget to look for fund balance money for the next year, and that kind of stymies the process of education, where you're really budgeting to spend money on kids and programs.
Right.
And if in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, I got to keep $300,000 in the budget for next year, I've done that before. We send out the signal in March or April to the administrators, hey, you need to cut down on spending. We need to get a fund balance at a certain level.
Right.
And that's not really fair. But if you do that, if you get those revenues unexpectedly, that's a different story. But when you have a high fund balance from year to year, it makes it very difficult to keep hitting that target every year unless you get some unexpected revenues. So we tended to keep ours low in the other districts I worked for. And like I said, Yarmouth, we typically only had we had an $80,000 contingency. We probably had less than $200,000 fund balance every year, and we just divvied it up into 7 different capital reserve accounts.
Historically, we have not, at least since I've been on the board, we have not ever had to freeze the budget, but the administrators can probably. Okay, because we don't draw the fund balance down to 0 and then look for the budget as a way to replenish it. We have
Right.
usually gone in with at least, when the budget was back around 24 million, we would have about 200 to 240 in the undesignated fund balance, even, at the beginning of the school year, so that whatever was saved was actual savings. And not, you have to freeze, no one can have professional development after February or whatever. So that is historically how it's happened here, so that, like you said, we're not chasing our tail and actually, like freezing people's budgets. I mean, I think it's a philosophy, really, is what it sounds like.
The line of thinking and why I asked was, so if currently we have 100,000 in the contingency fund, but we do anticipate more time for ELL, possibly another kindergarten teacher, and then I'm thinking anticipated costs down the line with our current state of our facilities, then does it make sense to put more money into the contingency fund? But like what you just said, Herb, like for instance, Yarmouth had on average, not always to compare ourselves to Yarmouth, but another comparison school had about
They
only
compare
80,000.
themselves to you, so
There you
it's
go.
okay.
It goes back
It's
to when I had
okay.
only 80,000 in the contingency fund. And so if we have 100 and we're giving another 50 some, so it's enough, which is what I'm thinking. Is it enough?
It feels like it to me, again, as just to give history, it makes me somehow feel old, but when one or two of the first budgets that I was a part of, there was a $30,000 contingency fund that it really didn't do anything, and we had a board member, David Hillman, who worked really hard to help the board and in conjunction with the superintendent see that, like, that just wasn't reasonable or feasible, and so slowly, we built it up. But again, how high do you go with contingency and that sort of thing? That's a dance too.
And another question would be that extra money, so if we're not putting in the contingency fund, what is the rest of the board's thoughts on putting it into some of those line items that we worked really hard to reduce to 6%? And everybody did seem really happy at 6%. So is it worth looking at those? Are we totally happy with the current state if those have been taken out? And that's just a question. If there was anything that was removed, then now we can say, is it worth adding back or not?
So just to clarify, so you're wondering if there's interest instead of in adding,
Instead of getting down to that 5.9, would it be okay to stay at 6?
And
were there some
replenish
pressing
some of
things
them.
that we pinched because we wanted to get to 6?
yeah.
Or,
a comment on that, and then also some questions on the numbers. With respect to the total number, I mean, I thought the same thing, you know, we did a lot of work, but I think we got comfortable with the 6, but it was already an uncomfortable number. I think so. We have to sort of keep it in context. From where we came, it seems like, oh, we've had the money, now we should go and address those things that were very pressing. But I think we have to sort of step back and say, that number was quite high. And when you look at our increases over the course of the last 5 or so years, it's quite out of line with, so we're sort of, I think that's my sense. I can't speak for everybody else either, but I think that if anything, it does make sense to sort of, in my opinion, take the more conservative approach of replenishing the contingency fund. But so, my question, to go back for a moment to the details, because I can't find them. I don't think they're on the paper. But so, it's roughly 101,000. We're looking to take 53 of that roughly and put it into our contingency fund, which is effectively funds that are earmarked and anticipated to be spent on roughly loosely identified things. And then the remainder would be to use to reduce what we're taking out of the undesignated fund. Is that correct? Or?
No.
No, the remainder is, the remainder of the funds out of that 101,000. That's the other piece of that would go to bring the budget, the expenditure budget down to 5.9.
It's a reduction in spending.
We were at 6.09, so we needed some of that money just to get down to 6, and we knew that. And then to get down to the 5.9, that's the rest of that money.
Okay. And the reduction in the spending is coming out of the revenue, the funds we're taking out of the unassigned fund balance? No.
So
Insurance?
It's the health
It's the health insurance.
insurance
So we budgeted
Okay.
for 10%.
Yeah,
We
okay.
can't
Understood, okay.
have to pay more than 7. So it's really,
Okay.
it's funny because it sounds like a savings, but really it's a reduction in spending. We don't have to spend that money. We thought we were going to. So now we're trying to divvy up what to do with it.
You could spend it elsewhere. like
Got it.
those cuts.
So we could do nothing and we just would have decreased the tax increase number, but instead we're saying, well, we're not gonna take it all.
We're going to decrease
Go back
somewhat.
a little.
And then put the
Okay.
rest in
So we
contingency.
did like 1/3, 2/3.
Yep, okay. Got it.
I was just going to speak to Laura's point, and which I think is a great question, and I think it's important to bring it up and have the conversation. And again, if historically looking, the expenditure percentage of 5.9 is so much higher than we've done historically in the past, and so to get it as low as we can, I think, even if it's 6.09, is that what you said?
We were at
We were at
6.09.
6.09, and then, wanting to get to 6. I think the fact of going to 5.9 is great because it looks like we're going to have to use the money from the contingency fund to help hire another teacher for ELL or kindergarten. I mean, that's smart to plan for that. So to use that money to go into that, and then the rest of it to help lower the tax burden is the way to go. Otherwise, it's just more spending that just brings that whole percentage up well beyond. It's been in, the 2% ranges, so.
2, 3.
So I think it's worth it, myself.
Kimberly?
Yeah, and I was very excited to hear the news that that there was the reduction, and I think particularly this year when we're trying to get the needs assessment paid for, included in the budget. I think it makes sense to do the decrease to the taxpayers, because we know there's that extra $189,000 in there to pay for the needs assessment that likely would not be there another year if we get it passed this year. So I too am sensitive to, like, I hate to see us take away stuff from the schools, but I think that sending money back to or not having increases to the taxpayers makes the most sense right now.
So I think just taking a different approach to how we even talk about how we got to the 5.99, I'm pretty excited about what we actually were able to do with the budget this year. In years past, it's not that we were just, not able to move forward. We were actually making cuts. This year, when we talk about cuts, we were talking about cuts from the original budget, which was, we're trying to really move some things forward. And I feel excited that, all the building administrators were able to put their, not the full amount that we hope to get to, but put a percentage of their supply lines back in and put a percentage of, materials and equipment back in. And so I actually feel like we've made gains this year, and I hope that we can talk about the fact that, this is the first year in several years that we haven't had a major cut from the state, and we received a little bit more money, and look what we were able to do with it. We're able to grow some programs, we're able to, especially in facilities and maintenance, we have been able to really put a lot of money back into that, which I feel proud of, and really appreciate the work that the administrators did to come up with the original version and then say, okay, and this is what we can still do, and we're still gaining. And so, it's my perspective that, we can be conservative, we can be responsible to the taxpayers and still move forward. And that this is the first year in 3-4 years that I feel good about it. I supported it every year because it's what we had to do, but I feel good about it this year. So I just wanted to put that out there, and it actually feels good. We've made some gains, finally. Any further discussion? So does the board, we don't need to vote, but does the board feel comfortable with the proposed use of funds? A nod will do. I too appreciate that Laura brought up the fact that there are other ways to use these funds, and it's an important conversation to have. And I think that if we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to have to send it all back to the administrative team anyway. It really wouldn't be in the board's purview to start cherry picking anyway. We'd have to send it back, and they'd have to get their big lists out again and duke it out over what would probably amount to be a very little bit of money. So in the end, I appreciate that we had, that the thought was brought up, that it's not a done deal, that we are, that we need to talk about this. But I appreciate, I think the board is being very responsible and thoughtful in the whole process, but especially, we've got this savings, and how can we do our best by it? How can we be forward-thinking and careful and that sort of thing, but also respectful of our community members. So thank you.
We have a meeting scheduled for, I think, the 9th.
We do.
Do we need that meeting now?
So we do have an April 9th. We had scheduled that with the thought that we would have our actual health insurance increase, percentage. And we may or may not actually have the number at that time.
Right.
And I think the only question left for the board at this time anyway would be, in the incredibly unlikely event, given the presentation that we got from the MEABT liaison, I felt pretty confident
That we were going to be at the top.
that we were going to be at the top. Maybe someone else read it differently than I did. But, in the unlikely event that we come in much lower than that, I think that would be the only reason to meet again? Would the board and the superintendent agree? I mean, if in some unlikely universe we came in at 2%.
Right? No.
Which, does that feel comfortable for people?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of leave it as a maybe unlikely on your calendar. Okay. Great. Might be a free evening. Don't know what to do with ourselves. So thank you to everybody, and at this time, would Win or anybody else, I'm being a little cavalier on the tape tonight, and I'm sorry for that. Would any members of the public like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you for participating in the budget process.